When I first saw Tanya Wilson in my guest lecture at that rundown community college, I never imagined she'd turn my carefully ordered life upside down. At 49, I was a respected economics professor with tenure, publications, and a comfortable routine. At 23, she was brilliant, hungry for knowledge, and from a world completely different from mine. What started as academic mentorship quickly became something more forbidden. They warned me, colleagues, friends, even my own daughter. But when a beautiful young mind connects with yours, you start believing dangerous things, that a 26-year age gap doesn't matter, that institutional rules don't apply to you, that your midlife crisis might actually be true love. I should have known better. Now I'm paying the price. My name is Mason Turner. I'm 49 years old, and I've been a professor of economics at Hartford University for nearly 2 decades. I've published 3 books, been featured in countless academic journals, and built a respectable reputation in my field. My ex-wife Caroline and I divorced 5 years ago when our kids left for college, and we both realized we'd been staying together mostly for their sake. Since then, I'd gone on a handful of dates with women my age, fellow professors, a librarian, even a divorcee my sister set me up with, but nothing clicked. That all changed on a rainy Tuesday in October when I was giving a guest lecture at Westfield Community College. It was part of the university's outreach program, bringing higher education to underserved communities. The classroom was nothing like the polished lecture halls I was used to. Fluorescent lights flickered overhead. The desks were scratched with graffiti, and half the students looked like they'd rather be anywhere else. As I was setting up my presentation, I dropped my flash drive, and it skittered across the floor. Before I could retrieve it, a young woman in the front row picked it up. "Is this what makes the magic happen, Professor?" she asked with a playful smile, handing it back. That was my first encounter with Tanya Wilson. While the rest of the class slouched in their seats, she sat upright, notebook open, pen ready. Her dark hair was pulled back in a messy bun, and she wore a threadbare but clean sweater. What struck me most were her eyes, intelligent, curious, with a spark of defiance that I rarely saw on my Ivy League students. During the lecture, she asked thoughtful questions that showed she'd actually read my latest paper, which was surprising enough. When the session ended, most students bolted for the door, but she lingered. "Professor Turner, I'm Tanya Wilson. I've read all your work on sustainable economic models for urban renewal. Your theories could really help neighborhoods like mine." We ended up talking for over an hour in the empty classroom. She told me how she'd grown up in Pine Ridge, one of the city's roughest areas, and was working 2 jobs while pursuing her degree. Her dream was to develop economic plans that could revitalize communities like hers. "Most economists just see numbers," she said passionately. "They don't see the people behind them. The single mom choosing between electricity and medicine. The kid who can't afford college application fees." When it started getting dark, I offered to drive her home since she'd missed her bus. She hesitated briefly before accepting. As we pulled up to her apartment building, a rundown complex with bars on the windows, I found myself saying something completely unprofessional. "I'm giving a talk at the Urban Development Conference this weekend. Would you like to attend as my guest?" The way her face lit up made something shift inside me, something I hadn't felt in years. I need to switch shifts at the diner, but yes, I'd love to. As I drove away, I told myself this was merely academic mentorship. But deep down, I knew I was already in trouble. The Urban Development Conference was held at the Ritz-Carlton downtown, a world away from Westfield Community College. I arrived early, rehearsing my presentation while watching the door. When Tanya walked in, I almost didn't recognize her. Gone was the casual student attire, replaced by a modest navy dress she'd probably saved up for. She'd styled her hair differently too, letting it fall around her shoulders. "Professor Turner," she said, approaching with a nervous smile. "Thank you again for inviting me." "Mason," I corrected. "We're not in class now." As we found our seats, I noticed the curious glances from my colleagues. Walter Chin from Yale raised an eyebrow when I introduced Tanya as a promising economics student. I could practically hear his thoughts, another middle-aged professor with a young woman on his arm. But Tanya quickly proved she wasn't just arm candy. During panel discussions, she asked incisive questions that impressed even the most arrogant academics. At lunch, she held her own in a debate about microfinance with a keynote speaker. "Your student is quite remarkable," Chin said to me during the coffee break. with new respect in his voice. By the end of the conference, Tanya was beaming. This was amazing. Dr. Patel actually invited me to email him about his research on cooperative banking models. We were standing outside as evening fell. The rational part of my brain was telling me to say goodbye, to maintain professional boundaries. Instead, I heard myself saying, "Would you like to continue this discussion over dinner? I know a great Italian place nearby." Her hesitation was brief, but noticeable. "I should probably get back. I have a shift at the diner tomorrow morning. I could help you prepare for your midterm," I offered, grasping for reasons to extend our time together. "And review that paper you mentioned." Her expression softened. "You wouldn't mind?" An hour later, we were seated at Vincenzo's, one of the city's most expensive restaurants. I watched Tanya study the menu with wide eyes, clearly calculating costs. "Order whatever you'd like," I assured her. "This is my treat." Over pasta and wine, our conversation shifted from economics to personal matters. She told me about growing up with a single mother who worked 3 jobs, about being the first in her family to attend college. I shared stories about my own humble beginnings, my divorce, my children now away at college. When the check came, I had a crazy idea. "Tanya, would you consider working as my research assistant? It pays better than the diner, and the hours are flexible around your classes." Her face lit up. "Are you serious? That would be incredible." As I drove her home, I told myself I was merely helping a talented student. But when she leaned over to kiss my cheek in thanks, I knew I was crossing a line I shouldn't cross. Within a week, Tanya began working in my campus office. The department raised eyebrows, but I assured everyone this was strictly professional. I'd had research assistants before, just not ones that made me look forward to coming to work each morning. The first challenge arose when Tanya needed to accompany me to a faculty dinner. The economics department was hosting renowned economist Alexander Hayes, and research assistants were expected to attend. "I don't have anything to wear to something like that," Tanya admitted, looking embarrassed. "Maybe I should skip it." "Nonsense. You've been analyzing Hayes' research all week." I hesitated before adding, "There's a discretionary fund for research assistants. Professional development expenses." There wasn't, actually, but I could easily cover from my own pocket. Later that afternoon, I gave her my credit card and directions to Nordstrom. "Get whatever you need. Professional attire is a legitimate expense in academia." When I picked her up for the dinner, the transformation was remarkable. She wore a tailored charcoal pantsuit with subtle jewelry, her hair styled elegantly. She looked sophisticated, confident, and still unmistakably Tanya, with that spark in her eyes. "Is it too much?" she asked nervously as she got into my car. "It's perfect," I replied, trying not to stare. "You look like you belong in any boardroom or lecture hall in the country." At the faculty club, Tanya turned heads, not because she looked out of place, but because she didn't. Dean Williams, who'd initially questioned my hiring decision, was impressed by her articulate comments on fiscal policy. Even my ex-colleague Richard, notorious for underestimating female students, engaged her in serious conversation. The turning point came when Hayes himself asked Tanya about her thesis topic. "Urban economic revitalization with minimal displacement," she answered confidently, specifically focusing on how to implement growth policies without triggering gentrification. Hayes nodded approvingly. "Fascinating. Who's your advisor?" "Dr. Turner has been guiding my research," she said, glancing at me with a smile. "You found a promising talent, Mason," Hayes told me later. "She has fresh perspectives our field desperately needs." Driving Tanya home, I felt an unexpected pride. She wasn't just my research assistant anymore. She was becoming my protege. Outside her apartment building, she turned to me. "Thank you. Not just for the clothes, but for believing in me. No one ever has before." On impulse, I reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "They should have." For a moment, we sat in silence, the air between us charged with unspoken feelings. Then she leaned forward and kissed me, not on the cheek this time, but gently on the lips. "Good night, Mason," she whispered, slipping out of the car before I could respond. As I drove home, I knew everything had changed. The line hadn't just been crossed. It had been erased entirely. The following weeks were a whirlwind. Tanya and I tried to maintain professional appearances on campus, but after hours, we were inseparable. I introduced her to my world: fine dining, symphony performances, art galleries, experiences her background had never afforded her. One evening, I took her to Le Bernardin, where my friend Jacques was head chef. As the sommelier poured an expensive Bordeaux, I watched her take in the opulent surroundings. Feel out of place? I asked. She considered this. Less than I expected. Maybe I'm a quick learner. She smiled. Or maybe having the right companion makes all the difference. After dinner, over dessert, Tanya surprised me. I got an A on my urban development paper. Professor Jenkins wants me to submit it to the undergraduate economic review. That's fantastic, I said, genuinely proud. Your analysis of sustainable growth models was brilliant. I couldn't have done it without your guidance. She paused. There's something else. Jenkins mentioned a summer fellowship at the Urban Institute. It's competitive, but he thinks I have a shot. I raised my glass. You absolutely do. We'll work on your application together. Later that night, in my apartment for the first time, Tanya stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city lights. She seemed pensive. What are you thinking? I asked, handing her a nightcap. That a month ago, I was serving breakfast at Denny's and struggling to pay tuition. She turned to me. Now I'm standing in a penthouse, wearing clothes that cost more than my rent, with a man who's everything I aspired to become. Does it feel wrong? I asked carefully. No, she said. That's what scares me. It feels like I've been waiting for this my whole life. She set down her glass. To be valued for my mind. To be seen. As we lay in bed later, she confided her childhood dreams, growing up in poverty, watching her mother work herself to exhaustion, promising herself she'd find a way out. Economics wasn't just an interest, she explained. It was my escape plan. Understanding how money works, how systems can change. I stroked her hair. You're going to change those systems one day. You really believe that? I do. And surprisingly, I'm in it. Her passion had rekindled something in me. Idealism I'd long abandoned for academic prestige and comfortable cynicism. The next morning, as sunlight streamed through the windows, I watched her sleep. At 49, I thought I knew exactly who I was and what my life would be. Now this 23-year-old woman had upended everything, making me question my complacency, my settled views. My colleague Mark had warned me weeks earlier. Mason, this mentor thing with a community college girl, be careful. I've seen how you look at her. I dismissed his concerns. Now I realized he was right to worry, but for the wrong reasons. The danger wasn't that I'd hurt Tanya. It was that she'd already changed me irrevocably. Spring semester was ending, and Tanya had moved into my apartment, unofficially at first, just staying over more and more frequently, until one day I cleared out half my closet and gave her a key. We maintained separate addresses on paper. The university had strict policies about faculty-student relationships, even though she wasn't technically my student. On a warm Saturday morning, we were having breakfast on the terrace when my phone rang. It was my daughter, Emily. Dad, I'm coming home next weekend. My summer internship starts Monday. I froze. My kids knew I was dating someone new, but not the details. I'd been vague about Tanya's age, her background, our professional connection. That's great, honey. Can't wait to see you. After hanging up, I explained the situation to Tanya. Emily's 21. She might find it strange that you're dating someone barely older than her. Tanya finished bluntly. Should I make myself scarce? No, I said decisively. You live here now. Emily should meet you. The weekend arrived with stomach-churning anxiety. When Emily walked through the door, her eyes immediately found Tanya arranging flowers in the kitchen. The resemblance between the two young women was striking in its contrasts. Emily in her preppy Vineyard Vines outfit, clearly a child of privilege. Tanya in simple jeans and a blouse, self-made and hardened by experience. You must be Tanya, Emily said, voice carefully neutral. Dad's mentioned you. Dinner was a minefield of potential disasters, but Tanya navigated it with surprising grace. When Emily talked about her political science major, Tanya asked thoughtful questions. When my daughter mentioned her summer internship at a senator's office, Tanya shared relevant economic policy perspectives without being condescending. By dessert, the tension had eased enough that Emily asked about Tanya's background. I held my breath. I grew up in Pine Ridge, Tanya said matter-of-factly. My mom worked cleaning houses. I got a scholarship to Westfield Community before transferring to Hartford. That's impressive, Emily said, her expression softening slightly. Later, after Emily had gone to bed, Tanya and I sat on the terrace with glasses of wine. She thinks I'm a gold digger, Tanya said quietly. No, It's okay, Mason. I would think the same in her position. I took her hand. She'll see who you really are eventually. Tanya looked at me with unexpected vulnerability. And who am I to you? The question caught me off guard. We'd been together for months, but had carefully avoided defining our relationship. You're the woman who woke me up, I said finally. I was sleepwalking through life before you. She smiled, but something troubled lingered in her eyes. Is that enough? I didn't answer. I wasn't sure myself. At 49, was I ready to build a life with someone half my age? Could we overcome the academic politics, the raised eyebrows, the inevitable judgment? But watching her profile in the moonlight, I knew I wasn't ready to let her go either. Summer brought new opportunities. Tanya won the prestigious Urban Institute Fellowship, a stunning achievement for a community college transfer student. The night she received the news, I surprised her with tickets to the symphony, followed by dinner at Daniel. To the next rising star in urban economics, I toasted, watching her glow with accomplishment. As the orchestra played Dvorak's New World Symphony, I noticed tears in her eyes. What's wrong? I whispered. Nothing's wrong, she replied. It's just, my mother used to play classical music on this old cassette player while she cleaned houses. She said it reminded her that beautiful things existed in the world. She squeezed my hand. I never thought I'd be sitting here, in this perfect seat, wearing this beautiful dress, with someone who believes in me. That night, our relationship deepened beyond the physical or intellectual. For the first time, Tanya shared her most vulnerable dreams, founding an economic development center in Pine Ridge, creating microfinance programs for single mothers, implementing the theories she'd studied to help communities like her own. Most people think I'm with you for your money or connections, she said as we lay in bed later. But it's your mind that fascinates me. The way you think about systems, how you can see patterns others miss. And here I thought it was my distinguished gray hair. I joked. That too, she smiled, running her fingers through it. But mostly, it's that you see me, the real me, not just where I came from. The following weekend, I took her to my beach house in the Hamptons. Walking along the shore at sunset, I realized I was falling in love with her. Not just with her youth or beauty, but with her fierce intelligence, her determination, her uncompromising vision of a more equitable world. I'm presenting my fellowship research next month, she said, picking up a shell. Will you come? I wouldn't miss it, I promised, knowing that my presence would make our relationship public in academic circles. The potential gossip, the raised eyebrows, even possible professional consequences, none of it mattered anymore. That night, watching her sleep beside me, I admitted to myself what I'd been avoiding. I was all in, whatever the cost. Fall semester began with a bombshell. Dean Williams called me into his office on the first day of classes, his expression grave. Someone had filed a complaint about my relationship with Tanya, claiming I was giving her preferential treatment and research opportunities unavailable to other students. Mason, you know the university's position on faculty-student relationships, Williams said, sliding a copy of the ethics policy across his desk. She's not my student, I argued. She's my research assistant, and everything has been above board professionally. She's an undergraduate at this university, and you're on the economics faculty, he countered. The perception alone is problematic. The age difference makes it worse. I left his office with an ultimatum. End the relationship or face an ethics committee review. When I told Tanya that evening, her reaction surprised me. Let them investigate, she said fiercely. We've done nothing wrong. It could damage your academic future, I warned. Graduate school admissions committees, fellowship boards, they might question your achievements. Her face hardened. So you think I got where I am because of you? That's not what I said. But it's what you're worried about, isn't it? That people will think I slept my way to success. She paced our living room. Maybe you believe that too, deep down. Of course not, I protested. Your talent is undeniable. Then why are you so quick to sacrifice us? Fight for me, Mason. For us. The argument escalated. For the first time, the 26-year gap between us felt like a chasm. Her youthful idealism clashed with my pragmatic understanding of academic politics. I want to protect her career. She wanted me to stand up to the administration. That night, Tanya slept in the guest room. The next morning, she was coolly polite as she gathered her things for class. "I've been thinking," she said. "Professor Abernathy at MIT is doing groundbreaking work in urban economics. He reached out after my fellowship presentation, mentioned a research position opening next semester." My stomach dropped. "You're considering transferring to MIT?" "I'm considering all my options," she replied. "Maybe some distance would simplify things for both of us." After she left, I sat alone in my suddenly empty-feeling apartment. My phone buzzed with a message from Robert Chun. "Committee meeting moved to 2 p.m. Ethics review on the agenda. You need damage control." Instead of heading to campus, I made a different call. To my attorney. By afternoon, I had a plan. I would take a sabbatical next semester. With me off campus, the ethics complaint would lose urgency. Tanya could complete her degree without interference. The question was whether our relationship could survive the separation, and whether I was fighting hard enough for what truly mattered. I spent a week finalizing my sabbatical arrangements. The plan was simple. I'd take a visiting position at Stanford for the spring semester, while Tanya finished her degree at Hartford. We'd manage long distance, then reassess once the ethics committee storm had blown over. When I called to tell her my solution, Tanya sounded distant. "We need to talk in person," was all she said. We met at a coffee shop off campus, neutral territory. She arrived 15 minutes late, looking different somehow. More polished, more confident, wearing a blazer I didn't recognize. "I've been accepted to the accelerated master's program at MIT," she announced without preamble. "Professor Abernathy fast-tracked my application. I start next month." "That's sudden." I manage my carefully constructed plans crumbling. "But we can still make it work. Boston's not that far." She looked down at her untouched coffee. "There's more. I've been seeing someone. A doctoral candidate in Abernathy's research lab." The words hit like a physical blow. "How long?" "Since the Urban Institute conference last month. His name is Derek. He's 31. Just received a major grant for his work on sustainable urban housing models." 31. I repeated numbly. Still 18 years younger than me, but not young enough to be her father. "It wasn't planned," she continued. "We connected intellectually first. He understands my research in ways." She trailed off, then met my eyes. "In ways you try to, Mason, but can't. Because you're from a different generation of economic thought." That stung worst of all. Not that she'd found someone younger, but someone more relevant to her intellectual passions. "What about us? Everything we built." "You built your career long before I came along," she said gently. "I'm just starting mine. Derek and I are pursuing the same questions, the same future." "I thought we were pursuing a future together," I said, hating the pleading note in my voice. She reached across the table to touch my hand. "You changed my life, Mason. You opened doors I never imagined possible. But I need to walk through them on my own terms, with someone walking beside me, not ahead of me." I wanted to argue, to remind her of everything we'd shared, to point out that this Derek couldn't possibly care for her as I did. But looking at her, poised, determined, already moving toward a future that didn't include me, I recognized the futility. "I'll always be grateful," she said, standing to leave. "You showed me what was possible. Now I need to achieve it myself." After she left, I sat alone, watching students pass by outside. Young, energetic, full of potential. I'd forgotten what that felt like until Tanya reminded me. Now she was gone, taking that energy with her. My phone buzzed. An email from the dean confirming my sabbatical. An escape I no longer needed from a relationship that no longer existed. The next month passed in a blur of paperwork and packing. I took the Stanford position early, fleeing Hartford like a coward. My colleagues assumed I was escaping the ethics committee. Only Robert knew the real reason I couldn't bear to stay. Stanford was beautiful, prestigious, everything I'd worked toward in my career, and utterly meaningless without Tanya. I threw myself into teaching, published a paper, attended faculty functions, going through the motions of academic success while feeling hollow inside. One evening, I was having dinner alone at a restaurant near campus when I overheard two graduate students discussing the latest issue of the Urban Economics Quarterly. "Did you read that piece on community banking models by that student from MIT? Wilson, I think her name is." "Tanya Wilson?" "Yeah, revolutionary approach. Abernathy's taking credit, but word is she developed the model independently." My chest tightened at her name. I paid my bill and walked back to my faculty apartment, stopping at a bookstore to buy the journal. There was her article, brilliant, innovative, exactly the work she described to me months ago. I read it twice, pride wrestling with loss. That night, I couldn't sleep. I found myself scrolling through old photos on my phone, Tanya at the symphony, at the beach house, laughing in my kitchen. Had I truly loved her, or just the way she made me feel? Young again, relevant, admired. The next morning, I call my daughter Emily. Dad, how's California? Empty, I admitted. Emily, I need your honest opinion. Was I fooling myself with Tanya? Was it just a midlife crisis? A long pause. I think you genuinely cared for her, she said carefully. But Dad, there was always an expiration date. She was just starting her life. You already built yours. That sounds suspiciously like wisdom, I said, trying to joke through the pain. I learned from watching you, she replied gently. Both what to do and what not to do. After he hung up, I walked to campus, seeing couples along the way, students with students, professors with age-appropriate partners. Normal relationships without power imbalances or 26-year gaps. In my office, I found an invitation to a conference in Boston next month. MIT was co-hosting. Tanya would likely be there. My first instinct was to decline, avoid the pain of seeing her with Derek. But as I stared at the invitation, something shifted inside me. I'd spent my career analyzing economic systems, yet I'd failed to see the obvious pattern in my personal life. At 49, I tried to bend a 23-year-old's trajectory toward mine, ignoring the inevitable mathematics of our different life stages. It wasn't Tanya's fault. It was simple economics, the allocation of limited resources, her youth, her future, to maximize utility. She made the rational choice. I clicked accept on the invitation, not to win her back, but to face reality, to see her in her new life, and finally accept that mine needed to move in a different direction, with someone in my own life stage, with shared memories and compatible futures. It was time to stop chasing youth and start valuing experience, including my own. The Boston conference was held at the Marriott Copley Place, a sleek hotel adjoining the convention center. I arrived early, my heart pounding as I checked the program for Tanya's presentation slot. There she was, innovative microfinance models for urban renewal, at 2 p.m. in Ballroom C. I attended other sessions that morning, barely registering the content. At lunch, I sat with colleagues from Berkeley, nodding along to their conversation while scanning the room. Then I saw her, across the dining hall, sitting with a group of young academics. Beside her was a handsome man with a close-cropped beard, Derek, presumably. She was animated, gesturing excitedly as she spoke, looking more confident than I'd ever seen her. I slipped out before she noticed me. Her presentation was standing room only. I stood at the back, watching her command the room with the poise of a seasoned academic. Her research was brilliant, her delivery flawless. During the Q&A, Derek asked a question that perfectly set her up to elaborate on a key point: the supportive professional partner I could never truly be. When the session ended, I should have left. Instead, I found myself waiting as she gathered her materials. "Professor Turner," she said, spotting me. No surprise in her voice. She'd known I would be there. "Congratulations on an excellent presentation, Ms. Wilson," I replied formally. She introduced me to Derek, who regarded me with curiosity rather than hostility. He knew who I was to her, clearly. He excused himself tactfully, leaving us alone. "How are you, Mason?" she asked, her voice softening. "Better now," I said honestly. "Seeing you thriving, it helps. In Stanford. I'm not going back next semester. I've accepted a position at the Federal Reserve." She smiled. "That's perfect for you." An awkward silence fell. So many things left unsaid, yet nothing that needed saying. "There's a reception tonight," she said finally. "Will you come?" I shook my head. "I have dinner plans." It wasn't a lie. After leaving the conference, I took a cab to the North End, where I met Catherine Larson, a Federal Reserve economist I'd known for 15 years, recently divorced, who'd reached out when she heard I was coming to Boston. We'd been emailing for months, rediscovering our old friendship. Over pasta and wine, Catherine laughed at my academic gossip, shared her own stories, discussed books and music with the easy familiarity of shared references and experiences. There was no need to explain cultural touchstones or bridge generational gaps. I was sorry to hear about your breakup, she said as we walked back to her Beacon Hill brownstone. Emily mentioned it when I ran into her last month. It was inevitable, I replied. We were in different chapters of our stories. And now? She asked, snow beginning to fall around us. Now I'm looking for someone who's reading the same chapter 1 am. She smiled, snowflakes catching in her silver-streaked hair. I might know someone who fits that description. As she invited me in for coffee, I felt something I hadn't expected, not the electric excitement of youth, but the warm recognition of possibility. A new beginning with someone who had lived enough to understand both my past and my future. Tanya had awakened me from complacency. But Catherine, steady, brilliant Catherine, offered something more valuable, a partner for the journey ahead, whatever it might bring.